Hey everyone, this is Francisco. I am recording this after we have finished recording the podcast. Just wanted to give everyone a quick update on what's been happening here. So, we have run into a lot of technical issues over the past couple weeks. So, firstly, we had recorded in episode 4 that we had to completely scrap. So that's one of the reasons why it's been a couple weeks since when we've put out an episode. So this one, when we initially recorded it, was planned to be episode 5. However, since we don't have an episode 4, we've had to move this one up to episode 5. So when you hear us say episode 5 in there, just ignore it. This is episode 4. You're not going crazy. But yeah, we've had a lot of different issues and different updates to the podcast. I'm not really going to talk about it right now. I'll give a more in-depth discussion of it at the start of the next podcast, just because I'll have more time to talk about it, more time to record. I don't want to waste your guys' time on this for too long. So, yeah, that's about it. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Bye.
This episode of Not My Podcast, Our Podcast is brought to you by toe socks. And we're going to leave it at that.
What are toe socks?
Wait, you don't know what toe socks are?
I'm assuming socks for your toes.
They're socks that have toes like fingers. They're like gloves for your feet.
Oh, it's like the
toe socks, yeah.
Well, no, not the socks. I know they have like shoes like that.
Oh, yeah. The barefoot shoes.
Yes.
I had Vibram. No, not Vibram. That's the name of the rubber. I have some in
Please
don't
say you have a pair.
I don't currently. I did in high school.
I don't know why, but those shoes creep me out. Maybe because I don't like feet. So just the thought of like seeing someone's feet in the shoe. I don't know. It's weird.
I mean, you are the antithesis of a foot fetish person.
Correct.
Yeah, Francisco's not a foot guy, apparently, but...
Do you prefer the metric system?
That's so random.
That took me a quick second. That was good. All right. Well, welcome to episode 5 of Not My Podcast, Our Podcast. I'm Francisco.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Sheldon.
Sheldon is our guest today.
So we're keeping the streak alive. This is now our 4th guest in a row here. So, Sheldon, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? What do you like to do?
I'm kind of a boring guy.
Yep.
I go to school here.
In our basement?
In your basement. I go to school here every single day. Eric is my teacher. I just go to school here as a student at UVU going for computer science. I'm just kind of a boring person, you know.
Do you like taking long walks on the beach? This is now your Tinder profile too.
That's a given at this point. Everyone likes to take long walks on the beach, don't they? That's like the generic so we just don't have to say
I don't like long walks on the beach because I've never lived near a beach.
That's fair. Neither have I.
Neither have I, but I also don't even really like the beach that much. I'm not even that much of a fan of it. My family loves
Francisco, that's controversial.
We're having controversial takes all the time.
The beach is better. I'm sorry.
Are you Sheldon, are you a mountain guy or a beach guy?
Beach guy, 100%.
Oh, fuck that.
Yeah, I'm with Eric on this one. Mountains way cooler than the beach.
No, beach is way better than the mountains.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
State your opinion. Why?
I mean, okay, so this is definitely just subjective because it's an opinion.
Well, of course. Yes, so is every opinion.
Right, but my reasoning is I've just grown up in the mountains and the mountains are great, but the beach is still novel to me. It's still the tropical warm air, the nice water, really pretty scene, nice sunsets.
Okay, I do want to say, and this is going to be very ignorant, and I acknowledge that, but I'm going to say it's largely due to the fact of my experience with beaches. So I have only been to a select few beaches, but I've been to those same select few beaches multiple times.
What beaches have you gone to?
Newport.
Newport's okay.
Some others. Balboa?
I've never been.
Oh,
I've been
Balboa
to a couple
Island?
out in
I've been there too. That one's okay.
I've been to some, and then I went to a couple near Monterey, so for the most part, the beaches that I've been to, the beachy beaches,
Okay. I don't know why you think that's so funny, but sure.
Because it sounds like bitch, Francisco.
I get
the
that, but
bitchy
sure.
bitches.
Sure.
So the beachy beaches that I've been to, like the sandy beaches, they all feel the same to me. And like I'm bored. I don't surf. I don't snorkel. I don't scuba dive. So it's get battered around by some waves and then get sand in my crack. And like it's novel and it's fun, but it's not something I want to do very often. But with mountains, and I this is where I'm saying my ignorance is coming through, is yes, I've grown up around mountains, and yet every single time I go, I'm still discovering more. And so I think it's largely that with beaches, I haven't gotten that sense of like new discovery. Whereas with mountains, like every canyon I go in is different. And
but I mean, I guess people that are like don't do like mountains and stuff will hear your comment about canyons and like, well, they're all typically kind of the same.
exactly, that's what I'm saying is like my perspective of beaches is that.
My argument for why the beach sucks is that the cool parts of water you don't do at the beach. Like going boating or like going tubing or doing stuff like that, you go to lakes to do that. Lakes, super cool, super fun to go to. The beach, salt water, kind of sucks. I mean, the beach, sand gets everywhere.
But I do want to say, when I was in Washington a couple months ago, we went to a beach on the Olympic Peninsula on the not quite on the Sound, on the strait that leads into the sand. The Juan de Fuca Strait, I think is what it's called.
I have no idea.
Something like that. I probably just butchered it. Sue me. But I had a blast on that beach. I've never had so much fun on that beach. There was no sand. It was rocky as hell. But I was flipping rocks and finding crabs and seeing if it was a male or a female crab. I was finding like all sorts of endoderms and cnidarians, like sea stars and hermit crabs and what's called the gumboot chitin, like all sorts of things. And I was just nerding out so biologically hard.
But the Northwest beach, I've never been.
Yeah.
But the Northwest region of the U.S., their beaches, very different than most other beaches you're going to go to. Like,
well, that's my point, is like, that was the sense of discovery. Something like, oh, this is new. It's not just in and out trash buried in some white sand. Because that's what all of LA's beaches are.
I guess that's kind of, maybe that's kind of comparable to like, again, me and you grew up with mountains all around us, but those mountains suck. The mountains where we grew up around, not very cool type of thing.
Yeah.
Well, maybe for you though, because you grew up in Las Vegas, and let's just say everything outside of Las Vegas kind of sucks. Like,
sure, yeah.
I'd argue that Red
just-
Rocks is amazing.
Okay.
Excuse me, Red Rock. It's not plural. Red Rock is amazing.
Yes, but that's just a small part. Like the mountains don't look cool there.
That's true.
They're
Yeah.
just big old brown dirt piles
Yep.
out there.
Yeah.
The mountains out here are fantastic. They're so cool to look at. They're so like visually appealing, and it's just nice to be like up in the mountains here.
Yeah.
But so maybe that is kind of the comparison of like, maybe there are really cool beaches, but a lot of the beaches that like I've been to, mostly like Southern California, not that fun. It's just a bunch of sand and water.
Yeah.
And that would have been my next question is like, have all the beaches that you've been to only been in like Southern California or like the West Coast?
I've been, how old was I? It was freshman year of high school. So I was probably like 13, 14 type of thing. We went to Hawaii.
Yeah.
And so we went to Maui. Those beaches, really cool, really nice type of thing.
I'd love to do that.
But at the end of the day, it's still like Eric said. It's like for me, it's like I don't surf, I don't do any of that. So it's like the beach is cool like for a day, but then it's like, okay, I'd rather go do other. We did other cool things. Like we went up to like watch the sunrise at the top of a volcano. I don't know why that was hard to say.
I mean, that's like when I think Hawaii, the first thing I want to do is I want to go to the top of Mauna Kea. Like I want to see, like I want to go up the mountain.
Yeah.
Because that's who I am. But
and I'm with you. I was like, I like that. One of the best things we did, I felt out there.
Yeah. I guess I can see your point, Francisco, but for me, I guess the vibe that I get from the beach just kind of fits my vibe. Like I just want to chill. And like Kevin from The Office would say, I just want to sit on the beach and eat hot dogs. So like, I just want to chill in the warm air. And going back to that too, my experience on the beach has been like twice in California, and I never got in the water. And the rest of the times was in like the Philippines, which was like in a tropical, nice place, and it was awesome.
Okay, that's
fair.
true. You did have a cool experience out there in the Philippines with all that.
Yeah.
So I guess that is fair. And again, at the end of the day, it's just opinions
Yeah.
with this.
Okay, so speaking of opinions, today's topic and the reason we invited Sheldon on for this specific episode, and a little bit of backstory on all of us, is all of us in the past couple years have realized that we want to read more. And speaking for myself, when I was junior high age, teenager, I loved reading. And then life got busy and it became something that wasn't important to me anymore. And it's only been this past year that I've picked up reading, and it's honestly been really, really a fantastic experience. And you guys have had similar experiences. And so we asked Sheldon on this episode so we could kind of talk about that and what it's been like for each of us from our different backgrounds to jump back into the reading game.
So you want to talk about your history with reading, Sheldon?
Yeah, let's get into my history here. So it's not really that much of a history, but
Are we going to do a Draw My Life?
yeah.
Eric's going to start a Draw My Life edit of this entire thing right now during
Goddamn,
the
Francisco.
video.
Every episode you make it harder for me.
I think that is way too much of a push to do. I am not going to expect that, but everyone out there is going to expect
Yeah,
it. So
they're going to want to see it.
If you want to disappoint our fans.
Francisco.
We do
Disappointing
have-
people is all I do.
Oh, jeez. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
No Draw My Life.
No
for
Draw
this,
My
but-
Life, but my story is kind of similar to what Eric said. Is like I read a bunch when I was in middle school, and then I kind of just like dropped it when I was in high school because I had better things to do, like video games to play and friends to hang out with and whatever. So I like kind of stopped reading for a long time. I guess I read a bunch on my mission, but I kind of count that like differently because there was literally nothing else to do. Like,
Yeah. It's also part of what you're supposed to do when you're on a mission.
yeah, exactly. And like honestly, it was more entertaining for me than just sitting there and doing nothing. So I read a bunch, but I never really got into any like fun literature or anything like that besides just like religious texts, which was fine at the time. But yeah, never really got back into reading since like middle school. And then yeah, just kind of like what Eric said, just this last year I made a goal I just wanted to read more. I didn't set like a certain number of books I wanted to read. I just wanted to read more. And so far I've read a couple books. I was telling Francisco earlier, I think I've read like 7 books this year.
Hell yeah, dude.
Yeah. So that's kind of where it's been at.
So you guys made it a lot further on with reading than I ever did. So I read a lot as a young kid. And I don't know if you guys know this, but I am a big fan of baseball.
What?
Well, spoiler alert. I don't know if anyone's ever heard this, but so yeah, when I was really little, I used to read a lot, and most of the books I would read was about baseball. Like I specifically remember this one series I read as a kid that the whole entire premise was like this kid who, I don't know, maybe like 10 or like 12 or something like that, would find these baseball cards of different players and then like travel back in time to when these baseball cards were there and like meet the players and like hang out with them. There was one where it's like he found a Jackie Robinson card and the whole book was about him and Jackie Robinson and all
So
the
it was
stuff
like
he had to go
Magic
through.
Treehouse, but for baseball kids.
But for baseball players.
Yes. And it was the best thing ever. I loved it. And then I got to I was probably like 11. And that's when I really got serious in playing baseball. And that's when I started playing baseball year round. And that is when reading just didn't happen.
I mean, it just
anymore.
wasn't important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why read about baseball when you can play baseball?
When I just go play baseball.
Yeah.
And then like all throughout high school, it's like I'd have all like my literature classes and it's like, oh, hey, we're reading this book. And I'm like, yeah, sure we are. I guess we're reading this. I was telling Sheldon this today because we were counting. I had 3 years of literature, sophomore year, junior year, and senior year. I read 2 books that entire time. Every other thing I had to do for reading to get through it, there was lots of copying going on from other people, different cheating that went on to get through with it. Okay, so I was going to tell you this about one of the best cheating scandals that I ever pulled off in high school So we had a book assignment, and it was a group book assignment. You're supposed to read this book for like a month or whatever, however long we're reading in class. And then Friday, we have a substitute teacher. And the substitute teacher comes in and is like, hey, your teacher told us that you're supposed to be doing a project over the weekend. It's due Monday. And it was like, create this scrapbook for this book you were just supposed to be reading. And so me and my group partner, we didn't read it. She didn't read it. She played soccer all the time. Neither of us read this. We're like, we're screwed. We're not going to be able to do anything. 5 minutes before class is over, the substitute teacher's like, hey, I have all these projects right here of past projects that people used to do before to give you some ideas. So she had the brilliant idea of just going and taking one, snap, create the entire project based on this one random person's project that we were allowed to see, got it back, turned it in, 100%. The teacher comes up to us after he grades it. He's like, wow, you guys did a really good job on this project. Can I keep it so I can show it to future students? And we are like, of course you can. Because we are there. We want to like help the future generations pull off the stuff we did.
God damn it, Francisco. As a current high school teacher, fuck you.
I agree. I have told many students that if they would just put as much effort that they do into copying and cheating to actually just learning, everyone would be A+ students. But we spent the entire time coming up with ways to just cheat the system to get good grades.
That's plagiarism, boys and girls.
100%. Who cares about it now? It's been, what, like 8 years, 9 years?
That teacher is going to listen to this episode of the podcast and be like, holy shit, and go back and revoke your high school diploma.
Mr. Oakton, if you are listening to our podcast right now, I would be very impressed. Welcome to the podcast.
We're glad you're here.
But yeah, so I didn't read basically from like the time I was like 10 until last year. So I started a little bit before you guys, where I kind of got on the same thing where I'm like,
what do smart people do?
It wasn't even what do smart people do. It's like, well, I'm about to graduate right now. I'm going to graduate in a few months. Like, what would like adults do? Because a lot of the times people have like, I know I have this a lot. It's like kind of that imposter syndrome type of thing where it's like, I'm not an adult. I'm still just a really big kid right now.
I hate to break it to you, Francisco. That is adulthood.
I know. And so I'm like, how can I fake being an adult more to kind of get it past people?
Make your own doctor appointments.
I've started doing that. I'm a big boy now. But yeah, and so I kind of went on the thing with you is like, I want to start reading more. And so I set a goal, literally the same goal you did. It was just like, don't set a number of books. I just want to read more. And so as I went on, I was like, you know what? I think 6 is a good goal. That's like once every other month.
For 2020, right?
For 2020.
Correct. Okay.
Hit 6, bang, good. And then I realized the one problem with my goal is I lost all motivation to read after I got done with that 6th book. I had about 2 months left in the year, and I was like, I read like 100 pages or something of the rest of the book. And then I was like, I'm not doing this type of thing. But this year I've decided, I was like, you know what? Doubling it. We're going 12. Started off the year, read 3 books in a month and a half, and then didn't read a single page of a book for 4 months. But happy to say that I am currently on pace to be able to read, I think 13 I'm on pace for this year. So
nice, dude.
I'm going to beat my goal, and I really want to beat it and not just stop at the 12. I want to prove to myself that I can go above and beyond my one goal.
You want to be like me.
Exactly. Eric has far surpassed his goal.
I'm going to justify this because so the goal that I set that because I also wanted to read more, but I knew that would not be an effective motivator for me. And I also knew that if I said read 12 books, that would scare the shit out of me because that's matching up with the number of months. And then if I miss a month, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, the point of this goal is not to read 9 books this year. The point of this goal is to get me to fall back in love with reading. And so my goal was 9, because 9 is not quite 12, but
more than 6.
More than 6. Like, because 6 is the same thing as 12 in my head. It's 1 book every 2 months.
Yeah, it's just you didn't want to fall into a rate.
Yeah,
because if you fall, for you, if you fall out of that rate, you're probably just gonna lose motivation.
Well, yeah, exactly. And it was, I picked 9 because 9 was 12 with some wiggle room.
Yeah.
That was the point. That was why I picked 9. It's like I want to go for 1 a month, and then I can miss a couple months. And I will say my goal was very successful in that I have fallen back in love with reading, and I hit 9 books in like May.
I was like, what are
Wow.
you at now?
Like 26, 27.
So here's a question though for that.
Yeah.
Your goal was to fall back in love with reading, which I think is a really interesting goal and an interesting idea. Like,
Yeah.
don't give it a number, just try to attain an idea or try to attain something that's a little less concrete. At what point, or maybe what was the catalyst that like, or maybe what was the defining point of, oh, I am loving reading now? Like, was it a certain book that you read, or was it just you reading that many books in a short amount of time?
I would say it largely had to do with the books that I started with. The first 3 books that I read this year were Dune,
I'm reading that one right now.
The Silmarillion,
You're crazy.
Wow.
and Game of Thrones.
Okay, so this dude literally just says, "Hey, lore, I want it
Right?
all."
I want
Like
all of
that's
it.
that's probably some of the deepest lore like that you could get in 3 books.
Oh, I mean-
especially Dune. I mean, I guess no, the
No,
Silmarillion.
especially the
Silmarillion
Silmarillion.
would definitely be more.
I
but-
can tell you way more lore from Tolkien's universe just from the Silmarillion than I could from Dune.
That's crazy because like even reading like I started Dune a couple months ago and it's going kind of slow right now and I'm really trying to finish it before the movie to come out later this month, but I might have to just wait until.
I will say with Dune, I listened to the first half and then
Okay.
I'm like, okay, I need a break. Like, because there's this definite point in the middle where the story changes. Like, I feel like it's 2 stories in one.
Yeah.
And I got to that middle point and I'm like, okay, I've seen the 1970s movie or 1980, whenever it came out. I've seen that. So I know that this is like the start of the next story of it. I'm going to put this down for a bit and come back to it.
Interesting.
I very much like, it wasn't I'm not enjoying this. It was, I need a break because that was a lot.
Yeah, the very beginning of Dune, and I'm like 70 pages in about, and so I'm still quite near the beginning since
Okay,
there's
yeah.
500 pages, but even just the first like 20 pages is just like a knowledge dump. And
Yeah.
I'm lucky that the book includes like an appendices in the back, and I've never usually had to like use those in books, but this one I was like, okay, I really need to like pay attention to like each of these things because like you're saying, it sounds like that first story is a lot of just universe preparation, kind of setting up, letting you get used to like different words and terms and all that kind of stuff.
I will say another thing that I'd say that honestly, the thing that has helped me most is that I have a round trip, typically a 50 to 55 minute commute every day.
Oh, so yeah, that's pretty advantageous, especially if you're into listening.
And
those
that's the thing is,
books.
I really, really struggle to sit down and focus on reading a
Mhm.
book. I'm so ADHD that the moment I sit down, I've got 1,000 things going through my head that I can't sit down and focus a book, especially something dense like Dune. And I've tried to sit down and read Dune before. But the advantage of audiobooks for me is if there's a moment that I'm like, wait, what the fuck? That moment's gone because I may have missed something, but I'm not focusing that I missed something.
Right.
I had that same problem with the reading thing. What really helped me is I'd go on like my hikes and stuff and on my drives.
Yeah.
And so I would go out to like the middle of nowhere, bring my little camping chair, best camping
Francisco,
chair.
nature is way too interesting for me to be able to focus on a book. I've tried that before. I went on a camping trip like a year and a half ago because I wanted to finish a book that I was reading. I read like 10 pages because the tree that I was put my hammock on was so interesting.
Jeez. but yeah, like that's what helped me be able to actually read is I just go to somewhere where it's like I can just tune everything out. It helped me kind of like clear my mind of everything. The second thing that helped me out with actually reading was donating plasma. Is because that is a very dedicated time where you just have to be sitting still in a spot.
Yeah.
For me, it usually takes about an hour to
Yeah.
do. And so it's like, well, I have to do something here. I don't want to sit scrolling through. Well, actually, I kind of do want to sit through and scroll through TikTok for an hour.
Or Reddit.
Or Reddit.
Yeah.
But it's like, it at least gave me a time of like, you know what? I'm actually going to sit here and just read. It's an hour twice a week that I can just go and read right now.
And I think at the end of the day, for those of us who have ADHD, having that structured time. So the school I work with lots of kids who are who specifically have executive functioning. I
was going to say disability, but I don't know if that's the right terminology.
We could say that. Because they're protected under the American Disability Act. They get accommodations because of the executive functioning and whatnot. So we could say it's a slight disability, that executive functioning piece. But I work with a lot of students who, like, I'd say 70% of my students are diagnosed ADHD. Probably 50% of my total students are medicated specifically for ADHD. Because that's just that's the school I work at. And one thing I've learned with ADHD people, especially teenagers, is ADHD people hate structure. But if there's no structure, it doesn't work.
Yeah, I was like, you kind of need structure for ADHD.
Yeah, it's this weird like dualism where structure is the bane of your existence, and yet and especially as you become an adult, you understand that structure is the only way that stuff will happen.
It's why I know you have said you think I have ADHD. I have other people say they think I have ADHD, but it's one reason for me why I make my like daily to-do list. Like I'll have like a huge.
That was the only way I survived college.
Yeah, and it works fantastic for me because I would literally have like this class I have this and this to do in the next week. This class I have this, and then for days I would like plan out some of my days where it's like, okay, here's my 3 things I want to get done today. I don't know when it's going to get done, but when I have free time, these are the things I'm doing.
These need to happen before I go home.
Yes.
I do. I even do that now. Like, I don't necessarily have a written to-do list, but I always have a mental to-do list of things that I have to do before I'm allowed to leave school.
Yeah, I do kind of the same thing where I've tried the whole, like, I'm going to schedule my day by every hour. And this is what I'm going to do. And it just is the most horrible way to go about your day.
It's so stressful.
Because immediately after the first hour, you're already behind.
Yep. And then the rest of your day is stress trying to get caught back.
Yeah, well, and because you haven't left yourself any options of like how you want to get things done. And when I do the same thing where I just like, okay, I look at my Canvas because that just has all my homework, and I just, okay, that has to be done today.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, I'll just look at what I've gotten done and determine, okay, do I have to get this done today? No. Do I want to get this done today? I do the whole like spreadsheet thing, and then I move around my schedule and like go in that direction. Yeah, there's no way that you can. Like, too much structure is always, I think, going to be
and so like with reading, the fact that I listen to books on my commute. Like, I don't listen to music. I like at this point, if I put music on, it's like, oh, this is a rare treat.
Ooh, spicy day. We're listening to music.
Ooh.
Let's put on some classical music to really spice it all up.
A little bit saucy, are we now?
So that's been amazing for me because that's 50 minutes a day at least that I'm listening to a book. And typically when I get home, I'm hooked, and so I'll throw headphones in and listen to another hour.
I have started listening as well. All the books that I read last year and through most of this year so far have been actually me reading, because I do enjoy actually reading a book. I don't know what it is, but actually sitting there and reading it.
It's cathartic.
What does cathartic mean?
Is Eric looking it up?
Eric's going to look it up real quick. I'm terrible at English, but...
Hey, Google,
don't define make up words,
cathartic.
Eric.
Here's the definition of cathartic. Providing psychological relief through the open expression of strong emotions, causing catharsis.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Hopefully that caught in the mic, because that would be a pretty good one. But yeah, I really enjoy reading.
Psychological relief.
Yes. But I've recently started, because I've talked about this on the podcast we had with Noah, is I'm reading Harry Potter. Well, I am not reading it. I am listening to Harry Potter because
for the sake of this podcast and for the listeners and viewers, when I say the word reading,
yeah,
reading and listening to an audiobook are synonymous from this point on, and I am not going to change that because I can't out of my vernacular. I have not read a book this year. I've listened to like 27.
I think
you
it's
can
the
still
same.
count it as
Yeah,
the same.
exactly.
Yeah, I would agree.
And I think unless you're the biggest book snob in the world, I think most people agree.
I mean, you got the story, you got the words, you're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, are you listening to it in your voice in your head or someone else's voice?
Correct.
Doesn't matter.
And so I'm reading Harry Potter. My sister, huge Harry Potter fan, but my mom and my aunt are also really big ones too. And so when I told them, I was like, yeah, I'm thinking of reading Harry Potter after I finish my last series. They're like, no, you need to listen to Harry Potter because
Is it Stephen Fry? Is that his?
it's Jim Dale.
Okay, I don't know. Who that is.
They love Jim Dale. They're like, he is the best person to like read these books, blah, blah, blah. Like any person that reads books and does the audiobooks, he's the best. I finished the first book. So after I finish every book, I have a group chat with my sister, my mom, my aunt, because they love reading.
Yeah.
And so I like to keep them updated of like, hey, this is what I've read, blah, blah, blah. After I listened to the first Harry Potter book, I was like, you know what? I enjoyed it. Some of the things I didn't enjoy was that it's basically just the first movie. They didn't cut much stuff out of it. And so it's like, I felt like I was just imagining the movie in my head. There was no creative thinking in that first one. And then I said something that they got very upset about. And I was like, I like Jim Dale, but I didn't like one of his voices for this one character. And they got upset.
Which
character was it?
I didn't like his voice for Hermione. And I specifically said, I was like, you know what? I don't know how old Jim Dale is, but in my head, I pictured like a 50-year-old man. A 50-year-old man trying to do a voice for an 11-year-old girl, that's probably pretty tough.
Yeah.
And so I gave that caveat of like, yeah, I understand that this is a tough thing for him to do. I still don't like it. They still didn't like that explanation that I gave them for that. But yeah, I was just like, he's good. I like him. And the thing that I've grown to like more about this guy reading, and you guys can probably, the books you've listened to can probably agree, is I like that he does unique voices for all these people. There are times where he will bring in a new voice, and before it even says in the book who it is, I can recognize from the voice that he's doing who's there. And so it's like, I can imagine this person showing up before it's actually told to me.
Yeah.
Like one person he does is Hagrid.
Yeah.
Hagrid's voice he does is so unique. None of the other characters in the book are like him. And so it's like whenever he starts talking, I'm just like, oh, Hagrid just popped up in this scene. Now I know.
I will say, because I'm also listening to the Harry Potter books, but in German, and it's a very similar experience. It's been kind of fun. His Hagrid voice is such Hagrid.
Yeah.
And it's like, Hagrid starts talking, you're like, oh, it's Hagrid.
Yes, but again, I complained about his voice for a teenage girl, and they got real mad
You've
at me for
got
that.
some standards there.
That's what I'm saying. Okay.
I mean, that's pretty reasonable.
I think it's reasonable.
Like, it's
Yeah.
a 50-year-old guy trying to do an 11-year-old girl's voice makes sense. It's probably not going to be the greatest interpretation of that person's voice in your head. So
That's something that I didn't realize was going to be a thing until I became an adult who listened to audiobooks, is that people who listen to audiobooks are opinionated about the audiobook reader.
the narrator.
The narrator. Like, there is one version of Lord of the Rings,
Really?
period. Because Rob Ingalls does such a fantastic job. Like, and no one dares even try.
No one even dares try to
No.
compare to him.
And I think it was recorded in the 90s or maybe the 80s. Like, it's old, and he was old when he recorded it. And so it just sounds like this old grandpa reading you this story, and it's and every
Kinda like
song he wrote
Gandalf reading you the story or something.
Yeah. And all the songs, he wrote melodies and sings.
Okay, that's really cool.
And honestly, I don't know if I could ever sit down and read The Lord of the Rings again, because he changed the experience for it.
Wow.
That's something interesting, because you guys are talking both about how you listen to these audiobooks and how it changes the experience.
Uh-huh.
I haven't. Okay. In my life, I've listened to a couple of audiobooks, but since I started this goal, I have not listened to a single audiobook. I can't do it.
Really?
Audiobooks, and like I'm not trying to like bash on it or anything, but like the way that I like absorb the information, the only time that I can listen to an audiobook is if I'm traveling. If I'm driving in a plane, if I'm just sitting and doing nothing, that's the only time I can do it because I can't focus on what's being told to me. Like I almost for the opposite reason of you, like you can't sit down and read because your mind wanders. Well, I'm the same way when I'm like listening to the voice.
Yeah.
And it's almost for the same reason why like I watch subtitles with every kind of movie or TV show I watch. Because I just get more out of reading the actual words. And so, I mean, maybe if I like read a book and listened to the audiobook, it might even be better.
I will say I did do that during sections of Lord of the Rings.
Okay, that would be interesting because you saying that the guy wrote the melody for like a lot of the songs in Lord of the Rings would be really cool. Because I read, this year I read Fellowship and Two Towers, and I'll be honest, I skipped a lot of the prose. And,
Yeah,
because
I mean, that's
it's
what I
just
did
kind of like it's cool, but like I'm not going to try to sit there and like read it all.
I'd also say if you're not a Tolkien lore fan,
right,
a lot of it doesn't matter. But like there's a song in there that tells a brief section of the tale of Beren and Luthien. That was probably my favorite section of the Fellowship because I also read Beren and Luthien this year, and so hearing Aragorn tell that and seeing the depth and the sadness that Aragorn has singing that song, because that song is about how Luthien, the elf, falls in love with a mortal man. And so there's crazy cool parallels between them and Aragorn and Arwen. And the fact that Aragorn sings that song to Frodo in but he sings the sad section, the section where she realizes that she's going to die, which in Luthien's mind in the actual tale is actually a really cool thing. But Aragorn looks at it as this terrible, she's lost immortality. And so having that like background knowledge enriched that section of the Fellowship for me.
Interesting.
So first time I read Lord of the Rings, I 100% skipped all of the poems and all the prose.
Yeah.
But like going back now, having a little more of a grounding on the Tolkien lore, it was a cool experience.
Yeah, I might have to go back and check that. I need to finish Return of the King, but I have to read Dune first because, you know, there's a movie coming out anyway. But I'd like to go back to Lord of the Rings at some point and maybe read and listen to it. Because, yeah, man, when I listen to stuff, if I'm just laying down or in my bed or whatever, I'll like miss things, and then I'm just like, I don't know what's going on.
So I have the same problem as you. I can't do what Eric does. Like, even if I'm so engrossed, like, because I'll listen to a Harry Potter on my drives. And even if I'm so engrossed in a part in Harry Potter, I can't just come in the house and still listen to it. Because if I'm just like sitting there, it's like my mind just starts wandering. I'm doing all of these things. But I also kind of like what you said of listening and reading at the same time, because that was my first thought to do it when I was reading the Witcher series.
Okay.
So the Witcher series was the first. So when I first started getting back into reading, I was like, well, what do I want to read? What am I interested in? Well, like I said, I love baseball, but I also love stats and data. And baseball is a huge sport with stats and data. Yeah. And so most of the books I read was about like baseball analytics and all of these things. I love those books, but I would never in like good faith ever recommend it to someone that also doesn't like baseball and data, except for one of them. And I might talk about it later in the podcast. But when I started reading The Witcher, it was the first like actual, I don't want to say like actual book, but like actual, what's the word I'm looking for? Novel? Or like story-driven book. Okay. It's the first story-driven book I've...
Fiction?
Fiction, what a word.
Yeah.
Yes, it was the first fiction book I had read in over a decade. And I'm sitting there and I'm trying to read, and I can't keep up. I am so like the way the author, you get used to it as you go, and I don't know if other authors write the way he does, but he kind of hops around in different scenes with different people. And until you recognize the pattern in which he does that, you're lost. You're like, I have no idea what's happening.
Yeah.
And so I was talking to my mom and I was like, I don't know what I can do to try to keep up. And she's like, have you tried listening to it and reading at the same time? And I was like, that might actually work, because the second problem I have is that I'm a slow reader.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the average reading pace is, but like,
You're below that.
I am below it. I can 100% guarantee, like, let's say the average reading pace is like a page a minute.
Okay.
I am a page every 2 minutes, about that much. And so it just takes me a long time to read. And I was like, maybe if I listen and read the book at the same time, not only will I understand it more, but I can also read it quicker and get through it kind of quicker and easier for me. And so I always thought that was an idea. I never actually did it, though. Once I kind of got the pacing of how this, I'm going to mess up his name. Andrzej Sapkowski wrote his books.
He's Polish, right?
Yeah.
He is Polish. And I also don't know if that has something to do with like the translation you kind of get lost in when they did it. But yeah, I always wanted to try it. I never actually did. So if you do go through like an entire book and like listen and read it, let me know how it goes, because I'm actually interested to know how it would.
Well, I can imagine it being like watching TV or a movie with subtitles. It's just you get now, like, not only are you just listening to it, but you're also adding reading comprehension to your listening comprehension.
I mean,
so it's
different parts of the brain are being activated that are only being activated when you're, only one of which is being activated when you're doing
right.
one of those activities without the other.
I also have found that when you listen to something, because we're not perfect listeners and we don't absorb information as it's meant to be given always, so we might misunderstand something when someone tells us something. But like when you pair that with reading it, it's kind of like filling in the holes of like each side of like, so like you miss things when you're listening and you miss things when you're reading. But if you're doing them at the same time, you get like a larger coverage of comprehension because you're using like two forms of like absorbing that information. Does that make sense?
No, that makes total sense.
Yeah. So like, I mean, that's why I watch movies with subtitles, is because you just get way more out of it. And I've gone back to movies that I've seen tons of times and then watch them with subtitles, because I used to think subtitles were dumb, but I was wrong. And if you think subtitles are dumb, you're wrong. But going back, and I've gotten so much more out of movies that I've seen so many times, or like lines that I never really understood, but never stopped to think about why I don't understand it or the implication of that line. It just kind of enhances the experience.
You just get more
yeah,
out of
you
it.
just get more. And like along the same lines, why you liked that story in Lord of the Rings, getting more just enhances that experience because it
100%.
attaches it to so many other things.
Okay, I do want to say on the other side of that same coin, I think my favorite thing about audiobooks is that it's a constant pace. So if there is a section that I would get stuck in, typically if I was reading, because it's boring and it's hard to stay motivated, so it goes at the exact same pace as the rest of the book. So I might not be completely engaged or getting very much out of that, but I'm getting enough that I can continue following the story, but I can just get past those difficult sections, especially in sections of the Two Towers.
Yo, Two Towers was definitely like, it's crazy because Two Towers had a lot of my favorite parts so far, but yet there were definitely tons of parts in Two Towers that are just really hard to get through.
I'm going to bring everything back to Lord of the Rings because that's me. But the parts that were really hard for me was the second half of the book, when you get into Frodo and Sam and there's just not as much going on.
Yeah, no, it's true. Especially like maybe the first chapter with Frodo and Sam is pretty interesting, and the last chapter with Frodo and Sam is pretty interesting.
And I'd even say some of the stuff with Faramir's decent.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree.
But there's just a lot of walking.
But right in between, it's just a lot of walking and a lot of, I mean, it's maybe he did that on purpose. Maybe he wants you to suffer with them.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I would completely agree. But that also is kind of one of the reasons why I actually got back into reading, and it's one of the reasons.
Because you like suffering.
No, but because I wanted to see if I can. Maybe I didn't think of this at the time, but like I wanted to force myself to focus on something, and maybe not in like such an unhealthy way, but like reading and just being like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read this. I wanted to be able to just do that. I think there's a lot of other things in life, or in my life, that like homework, for example, like I sometimes have to just sit down and like force myself to do it.
Yeah.
And that's not always easy, but forcing myself to get through a book is a little bit easier. And I think it's a lot more rewarding, especially when you've got like a boring part in a book, okay, I got through that, and now I'm at this really awesome part of the book. So I don't know.
I mean, you look at any kind of reading is no different than running a marathon, and I don't think any marathon runner is going to say that every single second, every single step that they take is enjoyable.
Okay.
And yet that's not like you're like, oh, I have to force myself to, like, that has this tone of like unhealthy, toxic behavior, but that's just how we do as humans, is that we get dopamine and serotonin after we go through the struggle. And so I think the fact that reading is hard is a good thing.
I would agree. I think it's a healthy kind of struggle. Yeah. Like
and it definitely encourages your brain to remain plastic.
Correct. And that goes to like kind of one of the main reasons why I got back into reading. And you said it earlier, actually, is smart people read a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, just to use the classic example, Bill Gates, that dude reads a book everywhere he goes. They released a documentary a couple years ago about Bill Gates. It's on Netflix, I think. But they interviewed one of his like assistants, and she broke down like this book bag that he brings on a trip. And every trip, it's like 20 new books.
Wow.
And it's all kinds of stuff from science to fiction to philosophy, and he just reads them all. And I'm not trying to say like I need to be like Bill Gates, but
I would say of the billionaires in the world to emulate, he's the one that I would want to.
Sure, I would agree.
I was like, yeah, he's a pretty good out of all of them. He's done some pretty good for the world.
He's the one that I'm convinced is a good person.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I'm like, I want to be a more, I guess it sounds kind of like I want to be a smarter person, and like I want to be someone who's just more knowledgeable about things in the world, more knowledgeable about different topics. I guess just kind of like a more smarter person. I can't think of a better word to say than that, but like, so yeah, that's like one of the reasons why like I really wanted to get back into it, is because like, you know, that is going to do nothing but good for like cognitive stuff.
I'm going to lean into that a little bit. So one of the things I've tried this year is to pick up some classics.
Yeah.
And I started with classics of fantasy and sci-fi. So I read Dune, I read Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
I read Starship Troopers.
That's a book?
Yeah.
Really? You'll have to show me that one later.
Yeah, I have very mixed feelings on that book. That book is the perfect satire. Is you can't tell if it's satire.
Okay.
I have no idea if that book's satire or not.
Okay, I definitely want to read this book.
It's uncomfortable how much like I am unsure of how satire is.
Okay, I haven't read this book, but I'm going to assume something like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is along the same line of like satire.
No.
Not even?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I wouldn't even call it satire. I'd call Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy
Just straight comedy.
Just straight comedy.
Just straight comedy.
Nobody reads Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Never mind. Let me rephrase this, because I remember talking to someone who this was not the case.
About to make a lot of people mad.
Gets Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy thinks that it's like meant seriously. Everyone who enjoys it is like, oh, this is hilarious.
Okay.
I did talk to someone at one point who was like, no, I thought it was the stupidest book ever. I'm like, well, then you're not the target audience.
This wasn't for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's Starship Troopers. It's so pro-military that people call it satire. And later in his life, he wrote stuff that was very obviously anti-military, very. But that book is like, I got out of it. I'm like, I had to go do some reading to make sure it was satire, and I'm still not convinced.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely want to pick that one up at some point.
But like so in the past month, I've read Animal Farm and 1984.
Okay.
How did you like Animal Farm?
I thought it was super interesting. And with both of them, I did not have to read either of them in high school.
This is the first time you ever read Animal Farm.
Yes.
Wow.
I had to read it in high school, I think.
I had to read it in high school.
I would have absolutely hated it in high school.
Knowing your personality at that point, probably. I read it the first time I read it in elementary school.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Our fourth grade class.
I mean, the
read
reading
Animal
level's not
Farm.
hard. It's
not.
super easy.
Yeah.
But at that point, we talked about our fourth grade class kind of they put a lot of the like I don't want to. This is gonna sound bad. The more gifted people at this school, they shoved them all into one class type of thing. And so we did a lot of different things. Like we read Shakespeare in our fourth grade class. We read and acted out Shakespeare.
That would be fun if you were reading the right play.
We read.
Yeah, which play was that?
Midsummer's
I was
Night's
going to say
Dream.
that would be the one I'd want to do with fourth graders.
Yeah. And then one of the things we read in there was Animal Farm. And so we talked about kind of like the symbolism of all of it. But when you're in fourth grade, it's like you can't really understand all of this.
Yeah.
I did.
That being said, I feel like as a fourth grader, you definitely can understand the gaslighting that happens in Animal Farm. And that's one of the big, I think, more so than a commentary on communism and whatnot. I think that's the main takeaway from both 1984 and Animal Farm is that the moment that you allow someone to change your reality in their favor is the moment that you have developed a unhealthy relationship.
Yeah.
So that was the big takeaway I got from both of them is they're both definitely politically influenced or politically motivated.
Yeah.
Of course.
100%.
Yeah, no doubt.
With Animal Farm, people talk about it being, and I'm sure there's going to be some literary person who's like, oh, you're so fucking wrong, and here's 1,000 reasons why. Well, deal with it that you can't talk to me right now. I thought that more so than being anti-communist, the whole main takeaway was the pigs started changing the laws and the rules, and everyone, and since none of the other animals were literate enough to be able to recognize that they were like, wait, that's against the rules, and the pigs are like, no, it's not. Look at the rules.
It's right up there. It's on the board.
And so that was what I thought in 1984. To this, it's the same message of you need to be aware enough of the current reality so that you cannot, or you don't allow people to manipulate your reality.
Yeah. I've never read 1984. Have you read either Animal Farm?
I think we read. I know we talked about Animal Farm in high school, and I can't remember if the book was just that simple or if we read a simplified version.
It is that simple.
So then we probably
the audiobook
did
is
read
3 hours long.
It's like 120 pages.
Yeah, we probably did read it. It's been a long time. I know kind of the whole premise and idea, and I remember the story with the pigs and them being in charge and the sheep always just doing what the pigs say. But other than that, I don't. And
then the horse, man.
But I will work harder.
Rest in peace, man.
But so I've been picking up these classics, and I feel like a lot of these classics, just part of the reason why they're classics is they point out issues in society, and they bring awareness or they make you think. And so that's part of what I think has been really cool and I've been trying to pick up those things that I feel like I've missed.
Yeah.
I never read 1984. I never read Animal Farm. I didn't read Great Gatsby in high school. I read that in college because I wanted to. That was the only book I think I read in college.
Great Gatsby was one of the 2 books that I read in high school.
I would have hated it in
probably
high school.
One of my favorite books that I've read.
Really?
I
thought it was absolutely splendid.
Oh, I love the story, and a lot of people, and I think it's cool that you like it because most people that I talk to, that when we're talking literature, nobody likes The Great Gatsby. I feel like that might be an unpopular opinion to like it, but I could be wrong. I haven't met a lot of people that do like it,
and I think if I had read it in high school, I would be in their shoes.
That's probably true. I didn't have to read it in high school.
I said this in one of our previous episodes, but I got to read Great Gatsby on my terms.
Me too, and that's probably why you and I both like it is because we talked about The Great Gatsby in high school, but we never had to read it.
So I'll tell you, I think I probably have the most common opinion of people. Because I had to.
Please.
I had to read it in school, and I actually did read it. This was one of the 2 books I did. I like the story. I did like the story. What I hated, and it was reading this book where I realized I hate it so much, is I hate analyzing books. I hate it so much. There's a one
exactly on my terms.
Correct. There's one part in the book where we were talking about this. What's the main character's name again?
Nick.
Nick gets
Tobey
into.
Maguire.
Yeah, I actually never watched the movie, but
It is Tobey Maguire.
we're bringing it all back to
It's
Tobey
all
Maguire.
back to Tobey Maguire is the best Spider-Man people.
So, Nick gets into a yellow car, and our teacher made us write like a whole page
Fuck
on,
that.
literally a whole page on like, what does the color yellow of the car mean? And it's just like, she's like, think about like what yellow represents in society and all of this. And I'm like, this is so dumb. Maybe the guy just wanted it to be a yellow car. Maybe he likes the color yellow and he thinks yellow cars look
Maybe
freaking
that
sick.
was the one that was available at the dealership. I want an orange car. I don't have an orange car.
Correct. And so I'm just like, that's where I realized I hated analyzing books. Why is the green light across the lake? Maybe he just wanted it to be green type of thing. It's green, right? I'm not going crazy.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's green for sure. And I think this is funny because this is probably my favorite book to overanalyze.
Yeah.
I love the symbolism that is, quite frankly to me, readily apparent throughout that book. And we were talking a little bit about this earlier, and for my like college English 1020 class, I had to basically just do like this 10-page book report. And I did it on The Great Gatsby because I
enjoyed it. Yeah.
I loved the book. I'd seen the recent movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire, who are just fantastic actors in my own opinion. But that was the easiest 10-page paper I ever wrote. Like I could find scenes and all this stuff from the book that I could just pick apart.
But let me point out again is that it was on your terms. You did critically analyze it.
But like as an
But you
assignment,
weren't being forced to analyze the color yellow. And I think I would have hated that.
that's fair.
I did hate it.
Yeah.
But like I finished Animal Farm and my first thought was, oh, I should go like read up on this and like learn some of the stuff that's in here. I don't want it shoved down my throat, but I want to go find it.
And that's another interesting, I think, side effect of reading, especially more things that have that kind of do the more social commentary, like a lot of these classics do, is if they give you the urge to go write your thoughts about it. At least that's happened to me. Have you guys had that similar experience in reading books?
To some extent.
I not a little bit, not totally. One thing I did is I wouldn't write my thoughts on it, but to help me better understand the books is I would take like notes after the chapter. And so I
Okay.
have a Google Docs form of like all these notes on different
Which
books
is
I read.
awesome.
Yeah, I think that's really cool.
I've had some people make fun of me for it, and I think it's funny. It works for me.
Okay, wait. They're making fun of you because you're using one of the skills you learned in your education experience to better understand material? That's what they're making fun of you about. Is that you're utilizing your resources.
I don't think this person was actually making fun of me, but she was like, wow, you're a nerd. You're taking notes on books you don't even have to take
Bro.
notes for.
Yeah, but like when I read the Silmarillion, after every single chapter, I would go read the cliff notes of the chapter that I had just read. Not because I was cheating on some test, because that's what cliff notes are for, right? No, but because it was a resource I had, and I wanted to get those key points that were going to be, because so much happens in every chapter of the Silmarillion, because each, like, the thing is, in Lord of the Rings, we complain about them just walking. The opposite is true in the Silmarillion, is that you've got a chapter, and that's like 200 years of history.
Uh-huh.
And so it's like, holy crap, who are all these people? Is this person going to be important later? And so the cliff notes were like, here are the things that you need to remember and understand from that previous chapter and that you were supposed to get. Honestly, I think I would have hated the Silmarillion if I hadn't done that. And it's just, there's no shame in using your resources. And I'm not trying to, like...
this person was mostly joking about it.
I don't know. I think it's interesting that in this experience of me like reading more, certain times, like especially like I was saying, when you read things that maybe apply to more real life things, I sometimes have the urge to write about it, and it causes me to think more about it, which in my opinion is like, oh, that's what smart people do, right? They read books, and you actually kind of
It put yourself into a scenario that you'll never be in. And makes you think about that scenario.
Yeah.
Which means that when you get into a scenario in life that you've never been in,
you're good at thinking about different
You're really
things.
good at thinking about critically analyzing what's going on.
Yeah, because I mean, even though reading a book might be a waste of time, it's way better than just sitting on my phone and quite literally mindlessly just scrolling.
To bring this back to Bill Gates is, and this is probably a misquote, But Bill Gates has once said that the most precious resource for anyone on the planet is time.
Mhm.
Because no matter how rich you are, no matter who you are, everyone has the exact same number of hours in the day.
Yeah.
And so, yes, is reading a waste of time? No.
No.
If Bill Gates is spending every waking minute and he understands that time is his most precious
Yeah.
resource, I think that's a really good demonstration that there's no way it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
Unless
I would
maybe
agree.
you're reading like tabloids.
Yeah, like again, because that's just stuff that you can mindlessly go through. There's no critical thinking. There's no reading comprehension. And the same thing with just all these things we do. We scroll on our phones. We look at all this stuff. It doesn't help you. Like, I guess it's like it just contributes to you being a more lazy thinker.
Yeah.
If I don't have to think about anything, that's the path of least resistance, and that's what I'm gonna do. And reading, I think, has definitely helped me be better at just thinking more. Yeah. And so that's a really interesting point about Bill Gates and him saying, I like that tie-in. That's really cool.
All right, you guys want to take a quick break and then we'll
Pee break?
hop back for the end?
Yeah. Let's
Pee break.
do it.
All right, pee break again, guys. See ya.
Hey, it's Francisco again. We just wanted to say that we really appreciate you guys listening to this podcast, and we wanted to remind you about the ways that you guys can be involved in this podcast. So the easiest way for you guys to be involved is to send us an email. Our email is notmypodcastourpodcast@gmail.com. Send us any thoughts about the podcast you guys have. If you guys really like Sheldon and maybe you guys want Sheldon on again, send us an email, let us know. If we said something that you really like or really dislike, send us an angry or a happy email and let us know. Or if you, I don't know, got any ideas or topics you want us to discuss, send it to us. We want all of you guys to be involved. We are also on TikTok. Our TikTok is @OurPodcast. And we're also on Instagram, which our Instagram is @NotMyPodcastOurPodcast. If it's easier for you guys to reach out through either of those means, send it through there. We'll always be checking the messages through that as well. But yeah, just wanted to say thank you guys again. And we got some interesting ideas we are going to be doing moving forward. So make sure to keep an eye out for that. All right. Well, let's head back to the podcast.
All right, we're back from our pee breaks. And so to continue on this theme of reading, for this last little bit, we're just going to give some of our recommendations, mostly to each other, and then you guys just get the benefit from our conversation about what books we've enjoyed in the past year-ish.
All right, so who wants to give the first one? First recommendation.
I mean, I've read the most books, so I probably will have the most recommendations. So
Okay.
I'm going to go first.
You
All
go
right, we'll
first.
do that.
We'll work down the line.
Yeah.
So one that I want to recommend that I thought was okay. So probably my favorite book I've read this year is by Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, and it is his 2021 book, Project Hail Mary.
Okay.
It was the first book that I've read since junior high that I could not stop reading.
Andy Weir is really good at making a story that does that. I read The Martian this year, and yeah.
So I read The Martian as the book that I read before Project Hail Mary. So I read them in succession. Project Hail Mary puts The Martian to shame.
Okay. Wow.
I thought The Martian was excellent, because it is. And then I read Project Hail Mary and went, holy fuck. The Martian's shit compared to this.
Yeah.
But so Project Hail Mary, let me just give you the quick premise. We look up at the sun one day and we see this line of light with our spectral telescopes that's going from the sun to Venus. We don't know what it is. But as we start observing it, we realize that this line is sucking energy from the sun and is eating our sun.
This sounds awesome. I love the premise.
Okay? And so the premise is, okay, we've got like maybe 10 years before the Earth becomes a frozen wasteland. How the fuck do we fix this? And it's the pacing is incredible. Like the reveals, like he's got it so well that you're like, I don't know what's going on. Like the main character, like the first page of the book, the main character wakes up in a ship. It's obvious that he's been in a coma for a long while. presumably a medically induced coma, and he looks in the room that he's in, and there are two very, very, very withered bodies on two other tables like the table he was on. So presumably those were his crewmates who did not survive the medically induced comas, because medically induced comas are fucking dangerous. So he wakes up alone, and then he realizes that the gravitational constant is like 14 instead of 9.8. Like he gets up and moves around. He's like, this feels weird. And so then he gets, at one point he starts is like, fuck, I'm just gonna, what's weird? And so he calculates G and realizes that G is actually 1.5 G.
Interesting.
He's feeling real heavy. He just gained a lot of weight during the coma.
Yeah. So that's where you start the book. And it's super good.
Okay. I mean, it was already on my list, but I'm even more excited now to read it.
Like, to the point where, so it's Andy Weir, so it's very heavily science-based and scientifically accurate as much as possible for a science fiction book that require, like, there's some suspension of disbelief, but it's only very slight.
Okay.
It's more than The Martian, but it's still very slight. And so, like, he brings in relativity and all of these, like, actual scientific things. And at one point, before even I started I was like, I just started it. The learning strategies. So our special ed teacher came to me, 63-year-old woman who was a working class woman for her entire life, got a job at this treatment center that I work at, and then just kind of worked her way up. And then they're like, you should go get your degree and become our special ed teacher. And so she did. And so now she's our special ed. But so she's just not a history of reading and science and math and that kind of stuff. And she's like, holy cow, I don't understand the relativity stuff. I want you to explain that to me. But this is so good. Like, she was sucked in, and she's like, I don't understand the science, but I don't care.
That's cool.
So probably that's my highest recommendation for the year.
All right, what you got, Sheldon?
So if we're talking like my number one recommendation,
Like, everyone that's listening to this podcast should read this book.
all right. Okay, if we're gonna do that, I loved all the books that I read this year. I've read Fellowship, Two Towers, The Martian. I read this other science fiction book called Saturn Run, which is probably the definition of derivative, but it's really fun. It's a great book. Look it up. However, the one I do want to recommend is, since I told you before that one of the reasons why I started reading books was to become smarter or more intelligent. I decided that as part of my reading initiative, I would read fun books and like a smart person book. So maybe a book that's purpose is to inform or educate. And I think the one book that I would recommend to everyone in that genre of like more informative is called White Fragility. This book is about racism, and I mean, more specifically on that leaf is like white fragility. And it was a really interesting book to me because it was probably the most informative book that I've read recently. And
Like, was it about like white privilege or?
yeah, well, it talks about like why it's so dang hard to talk about racism in America.
What was the name again?
White Fragility.
White Fragility.
It's by Robin DiAngelo. And we actually got it from work, and they said, hey, you can read this during your downtime. And so I read it, and I'll be honest, it's a hard read. And that just kind of proves the point of the book, that, you know, racism is uncomfortable for people.
Yeah.
And
until
the book was uncomfortable to read. And I was like, I think I would think in my head, like, I don't like this book because it's uncomfortable, but then realize, well, that's like literally the title of the book.
It's the point.
It's the point. And so that kind of kept me reading it. And I think probably for the first time in my life, that was like something that I really tried very hard to keep an open mind on. And I think it was very beneficial to me. And I think I've changed a lot of opinions in my own like headspace. And I try to look at a lot of those types of issues differently now. And so I would recommend that everyone read it. Just give it a shot, uncomfortable or not, whether you agree with it or not in the end. I would recommend that everyone just read it, just to have another point of view. And it's not the only book. There's tons of books out there that talk about a lot of the same things. And, you know, that happens just to be one that I read. So,
yeah. Like, well,
yeah. So that's probably, if we're that would be maybe not number one recommendation, but in that field of more informal books, I would recommend that.
All right.
Francisco, what do you got?
So, when we were talking about the books I read earlier, I was talking about the I love baseball and I love stats and I love data.
Hi, I'm Francisco and I love baseball.
Hi,
So,
Francisco.
there is a book that talks about all three of these things that I think is very enjoyable. And I think for the most part, people could get a really big enjoyment out of. The book is called The Only Rule Is It Has to Work.
Oh, you've told me about this book.
I did tell you about this book. And so here's the premise behind it if you guys don't know. There are these two baseball writers. They are very big analytic baseball writers. They love looking at stats and talking about different things and all that. They have their a podcast that they release, I think, 3 times a week. They are much better at releasing podcasts than us. The only rule is it has to work. The premise of this is these two guys are approached by a independent league baseball team. So you have, for people that don't know, MLB, biggest baseball league in the world. They have them and all of their minor league teams. If you are not playing for one of those minor league teams, there are, I think, like 6 or 7 independent leagues where they run a whole baseball league on their own with no attachment to the MLB at all. And so one of them came to these writers and are like, hey, come out here and put your ideas to the test. We are going to let you run our baseball team. The only rule is that whatever you do, it's got to work. And so it's a very much a thing of like, put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
Everyone and their mom has ideas on how they would do things if they're in charge, how they would change things. These guys actually got to put it to the test. Like, do my crazy ideas about baseball work, or are they just work on paper and can't actually work in real life? And so the whole process of them like taking control of this baseball team and having to deal with not only implementing these things, but convincing the manager and the players to be able to buy into their system that they're trying to run is such a unique way of looking at, like, there's no one Band-Aid solution to any real problem. It's like these problems are very complex, and it's not like flip a switch and we can solve it. And I think it's a very good way to inform people that some of the bigger problems that don't involve baseball and involve much more important things, some of our crazy ideas might just not work either in practice or in theory. And I really enjoy it because it gives you that in of like, oh, if only I could be the one to be in charge type of thing.
Yeah.
I have a question about that book. Do you think someone who's like not really know anything about baseball or data would enjoy that book?
And that was the question I asked myself the entire time I was reading it. Because I started it, and it was the one book this year that I couldn't put down. I read this book in, I think, 2.5 weeks.
Wow.
Which is amazing for me.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude.
And I started reading it, and I was like, I think my mom would like this. And so the entire time I'm reading this, I was like, can I actually recommend this to my mom? And I want to say yes. Obviously, you're not going to, if you don't really know about some of the baseball stats, you're not going to get it. But I think they do a good enough job with explaining some of the baseball stats that they're talking about to gain context into what they're doing. But obviously, if you're really ingrained in it and know all of it, you're going to have much more from this. But I think still the underlying thing of like putting your money where your mouth is overcomes all of the I don't know the baseball stuff type of thing. But that was a question I asked myself the entire time reading it.
I mean, I read a book where I had a similar like thought process. So when I spoke earlier, I actually lied. The first book I read this year was called The Jazz of Physics.
Okay.
And it's like, holy shit, is there a book better like written for me about? It's a book that combines
music and physics,
jazz, and theoretical physics.
So it's like the music genre jazz.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Like the author, and I would say the fact that I understood like when he was talking about physics and music theory definitely helped as a reader. And I would struggle to recommend it to someone who doesn't fit that shoes. The New York Times bestseller list disagrees with me because it was a New York Times bestseller for a long time.
Wow.
Like it was it's a really well liked book. So I think part of it is that I got all of the physics stuff, and so I was like, oh, that's why this book is cool. where everyone else is like, oh, cool, like all this cool stuff. But the cool thing about that book is that it's all about him like showing how interdisciplinary activities benefited his primary career.
Okay.
And so I actually had a couple students read it last year. Students who didn't like English, but loved physics or loved math.
Yeah.
And so they were doing an honors project. And so I said, you're going to read this book. And then you're going to tell me about interdisciplinary studies and about why you think he wrote this book. And so I can't recommend that book to other people, but I thought it was a very, very similar kind of experience.
Interesting. That's cool.
All
I'll
right.
have to check that one out.
Got a second one, Eric. I think we can probably have time for one more of each of us if
All
we
right.
want to give one more recommendation. Last ditch.
The other one that I would recommend this year will be along the lines of Sheldon's. Is a smart person book. Not that Project Hail Mary isn't, but I would recommend. It's called Sapiens.
You loved this book.
I loved this book.
Who's the author?
Some Israeli anthropologist whose name I can't remember.
Okay, fair enough.
Eric will put it up on screen right now for everyone to recommend. Not to recommend, so you can see who it is. It'll be right here.
Jazz hands. So that book goes from the dawn of hominids to present day.
Kind of like guns, germs, and steel type of thing.
I don't know yet. That one is just got my hold at the library today. It was like, hey,
Okay.
you just got this book because I was talking about
Yeah,
Sapiens
yeah.
with someone else like a week ago, and he's like, oh, if you like that book, you should listen to Guns, Germs, and Steel.
Yeah, that one's on my list of. Yeah. Anyway,
But so from what I understand, Guns, Germs, and Steel looks more at different populations. Like, why did the British succeed, and why?
that and more like on civilizations of like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this one looks more at why did sapiens succeed? Why didn't Neanderthals succeed?
Interesting. Okay.
Or let's talk about Homo erectus. Homo erectus was on the planet for 1 million years. That's way longer than Homo sapiens will ever be around. Like we've only been on here for 200, 300,000 years. I don't remember exactly what the number is,
About
but
that much. Yeah.
Fingers crossed we can get to that 1 million.
exactly. Like I'm not confident we're going to get there. And at the very least, even if we do get there, I'm not confident that we'll still be sapiens.
I was gonna say, or we'll still even be here.
Yeah, like, are we going to be on the planet?
That's a good
Or
point.
are we just going to trash this planet and then move to a different one? Like, so he goes in and like talks about what specific features, and the other thing he looks at is what happened 1,000, 2,000 years ago that suddenly allowed humans to become such a dominant species. Because if you look at the last few thousand years, the number of humans, all species included, the carrying capacity has been the same for the last 1 million years or longer. Like, there have been about the same number of humans on the planet for a long time until 1,000 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
And that's part of one of the things he points to in there is that's part of the reason why the planet is so fucked right now is because the planet is really good at checks and balances over long periods of time.
yeah.
And so this evolutionary change that we had, where suddenly we went from just a normal regulated species on the planet to what we are now, like, what changed? And it's a fascinating read. I loved that book. That's one of my favorite books I read this year.
That has like totally piqued my interest. Like that sounds something that I'd really enjoy to read.
Yeah. And it's I will say it's gotten a fair amount of criticism from the scientific community.
Okay. For what reason?
That it's not academically rigorous. To which I respond, no fuck. Like, of course it's not academically rigorous. It's not in a fucking journal. If we wanted something academically rigorous, we'd open a fucking scientific journal.
Well, and as far as I understand, like the knowledge we have about, anything basically prehistory
speculative.
is really speculative at best. And
yeah.
So
like scientists, a lot of the academics are like, well, it's not actually all true. And it's like, but it's entertaining. It makes you think. And it's based on decent evidence.
but I do think it is important to kind of realize that the
Yes.
fact that, okay, it is speculative at the end of the day, but speculation can be a good thing.
Yeah.
And I like the idea.
And I don't know if the fact that humans in Africa figured out how to eat bone marrow is the only reason that we exploded, but that's one of the ones that he points to.
Maybe.
It's free.
Interesting.
It's free calories, free real estate, because no one else eats bone marrow.
It's free real estate.
It's free real estate.
All right, Sheldon.
All right, Sheldon.
All right.
One more from you.
Because I'm gonna just stick in the same vein and stick with my smart people books. And okay, I'll do a mini recommendation. Saturn Run. I'm gonna say it again. If you want just a really fast, fun space adventure, read it. It's fun. But my other recommendation would be another smart person book by Malcolm Gladwell called Outliers. And basically, he analyzes.
I've heard really good things about
it's
that
a
book.
fantastic book. It's he analyzes the people that are outliers in society on intelligence level. Those people that are really smart, that have just such high IQ levels, and what really is like kind of the secret to success.
Does he also talk about some of the drawbacks of people with really high IQs?
Yes, he does talk about that a little bit. I don't think he focuses on that much, but the purpose of the book is to kind of quantify success and kind of show you that being a successful person, yeah, there are some elements of luck that are involved, but I think there's a lot more things that we can control that we're not aware of or that we don't think of. And like one of the things he pointed out is he used hockey players in Canada. There is an very inordinate amount of hockey players, professional hockey players
in Canada, period.
In Canada that were born in the first 2 months of the year. And it's kind of an interesting phenomena, but the reason why is because a lot of these people have been playing hockey in little league and, kid leagues all the way up until the big leagues. The cutoff date for signups is at the first of the year.
Yep.
So naturally, what happens is the older kids, when they go to play hockey, are the ones born in January and February. So since they're older, they're better because they've had more time to play hockey than a lot of the other kids that they're playing with.
And they have an entire year's more of physical development.
Correct. And
6 months or a few
since
months,
they're
which is a lot with kids.
And since they're better, coaches pay more attention to them. And since they do that, they get even better.
It's a positive feedback loop.
They get the positive feedback loop until the big leagues come. And that's why a lot of them, a significant portion of these professional hockey players are born in January and February.
Huh.
And so, yeah, there is definitely some degree of like just natural talent. These kids just had more time and more attention paid to them. And so you think about it, it makes you kind of just reassess your own life and like, okay, what are some things that like I can actually control, that I can actually do to improve myself? And he goes through tons of other examples and many other fields besides athletics.
Well, step one,
yeah.
Start reading.
Start reading. And it was a very fantastic display of how easy it can be to be successful. Were you going to say something?
Oh, well, I was going to say Eric's wrong with what step one is. Step one is choosing when you're born. Like, you got to choose a good month to be born in. Obviously, if you want to be a hockey player, you got to choose January. The people that chose December, they chose bad. They should have thought smarter.
They should have thought smarter.
But if you chose badly on that and you didn't succeed as a hockey player, now if you want to be successful, step one, start reading.
There we go.
There you go.
So I guess choosing when you're born is step 0.
Yeah.
We're counting from 0.
Yeah, I mean, we count our age from 0, so makes sense.
Yeah, everything should be based on 0. I'm just saying.
Okay, CS major. All right. Well, I'm going to go completely different direction than these people talking about smart people books.
Go for it. We need more fiction.
Yeah, we do.
So the books that I read the rest of the books I read this year, I have read, so over the past year, I've read the entirety of the Witcher series. I can't in good faith actually recommend that to people. If you are a fan of the Witcher games or any of the Witcher, anything that's happened, you'll love the books. But I don't think that if you're not already a fan, that you'll actually like the books. I can't in good faith know that you would or not, so I can't recommend that. The other books I'm reading is Harry Potter, and everyone and their mom has already read Harry Potter. So I'm going to go back in the time machine for a second. A book that I read last year. It is a very short book, but there is a lot of them. And we're stretching the definition of book a little bit.
Oh, hell yeah. I know what you're going to recommend.
I think people should go and read The Avatar: The Last Airbender comic books.
Oh, dude, that's like, I've never read those, but like, of course I'm gonna read those.
The comic books, so I have only read, they release them in sets of 3. So it's 3 comic books for an entire comic book story. I don't know what to
3
call it.
issues.
3 issues. So I have only read the first collection of the first 3. And it's so enjoyable. It's such a good,
Whose storyline does it follow?
I think it follows different ones, don't they?
So for this first one, it follows the storyline between Aang and Zuko.
After?
So it is immediately the start of the comic books immediately starts after the end of the show.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
And so
Do you learn about Zuko's mother?
not in this one.
Okay.
There are comic books where you do.
I thought
Ooh,
so,
okay.
but
No spoilers,
no,
please.
no spoilers, but do we want to spoil a show from Nickelodeon that ended in 2008?
yes.
I feel like they've had their chance.
No,
Okay.
no.
Or we
it's
could just say
not worth
spoiler
spoiling.
alert.
No.
Okay.
I don't think we should spoil it because that one's one that if you haven't seen,
It's
it's a
great.
kid's show.
It's good for
Oh, well.
any age.
Yeah, it's
Go
good
watch it.
for
We watched
everybody.
it during COVID, and it was a couple of our roommates' first time watching it.
And we binged it.
We binged it, and they loved it. And they're like, "We didn't watch this because it was a kid's
Did you
show."
guys
but-
cry?
Oh yeah,
Of course.
Yeah, okay.
Everyone cries at this.
Everyone cries.
At the points where everyone cries,
everyone cries.
shed some tears.
Yeah.
But no, so it happens right after the end. So Zuko and Aang are doing their things, and there's some little tension between them that happens. And then it hops a year into the future, and it talks about some of the tension that happens between Zuko and Aang for this thing. It's a pretty good storyline. And again, it's just, I love the universe. I think the world that these creators created, that's a weird way of saying that,
I feel it.
it's so unique that it's just so enjoyable that spending more time in it is great.
That's why I'm super looking forward to the Avatar: The Last Airbender
Live
RPG
action. Oh, are they making an
that
RPG?
I backed on our Kickstarter.
It is
Oh, very cool.
It is okay. I'm gonna say this. People might be mad. It's like a D&D Avatar game.
Yeah,
Cool.
Tabletop RPG,
There
but
we go.
Avatar,
Awesome. I love that idea.
It's so great.
and it like
Are they still taking donations?
no.
they
Dang.
literally 20 minutes in hit their goal.
Oh, dude, yeah.
And then they kept adding stretch goals, and they kept being met, and eventually they're like, "We're done
good."
adding stretch goals because it's no longer achievable."
Yeah, they're like, we can't do it. Like, there's not anything else we could really do with if we had more money. So
That's cool.
But that's my recommendation is maybe not just necessarily if you haven't watched Avatar or don't like it, you don't need to, but just finding more stuff for the things you like. If you like a certain series and they have more of it that maybe not, this is technically comic books 100% canon for the show and everything. But just being involved in like the universes you love more is great. I love it. So that is my final recommendation. Sorry, I gave one smart people book and then I had to rein us back into stuff fun.
That's a great balance.
Can I add a closing thought that's kind of related to that?
Sure.
So, it's going to involve a slight tangent. So I've gotten you know this, but I've recently gotten really into mushroom foraging.
Yep.
And one of the things that someone I saw, I don't know where I saw it, but it like stuck with me is that they made the point that among all life, there are kingdoms of life. So you've got animalia, you've got plants. One of those kingdoms is fungi. And so the point that they made is you don't like it's not that you don't like mushrooms. It's that you just haven't found one in that kingdom that you like. Like, it is so diverse. There are mushrooms that taste like shrimp and crab and who have the texture of shrimp and crab. Like, it's called shrimp of the woods.
Oh, it's like an actual thing.
No, that's an actual mushroom.
Oh,
That's
wow.
awesome.
So it's not that you don't like mushrooms, it's that you've only been exposed to white bell mushrooms that are in the grocery store. That is one species in an entire kingdom. And so my advice with reading is we all had to read in school. That's your white bell mushroom. You either liked it or you didn't. I don't care if you did. There's a mushroom out there for you. You just have to go out and find that mushroom. So if you are a person who says, I don't like reading, well, here's my advice. Find a means that doesn't absolutely bug you, so if that's audiobooks, if that's comic books, if that's graphic novels, if that's just sitting down and reading, if that's reading children's books to your kids, start somewhere that doesn't drive you crazy. And then if you read a book and you don't like it,
Stop.
That was, so I told you earlier I was going to share an anecdote from today. Today I was listening to a book that I was like, earlier I was like, I think I'd like this. It's Michael Crichton, the guy who wrote Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
I read other books of his. I love other books of his. And this one's called Airframe. It's about airplanes. I'm like, I like airplanes. I like Michael Crichton. This will be dope. I got like 2.5 hours in and I was just bored. It hadn't grabbed me and like, and it was liberating to be able to go, you know what? Nobody's forcing me. I don't have to. If I'm not enjoying this, that's not why I'm reading to enrich my life, I'm not trying to force myself to read something I don't enjoy.
Correct.
Yeah.
So go find the book that is something you enjoy. It could be a baseball book. It could be a book about white privilege. It could be a fucking picture book. It could be like a pop-up book. Like it could be anything.
Yeah.
But start somewhere. Find something you like and then bridge off that.
That was such a great analogy. I was wondering where you were going with this.
I was a
mushroom
little
thing,
curious. I was like, okay.
but you brought it around. That is a really good one to have. Wow, I'm impressed, Eric.
Thank you.
I was impressed at your analogy right there.
I do perform sometimes.
Sometimes.
Sometimes we'll just, put that across the screen with an asterisk.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thanks.